The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode 147.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing something a little different. We're talking about what some have called the second greatest Star Trek movie ever made.
I was going to call it the greatest Star Trek movie ever made.
And some have called it the greatest Star Trek movie ever made. We're talking about Galaxy Quest, that 1999 movie starring Tim Allen and a whole great cast. And it has become a classic of the genre, an homage. Joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going? I can't believe it was 1999. For some reason, I thought it was earlier, but...
Yeah, yep. For some reason, I thought it was later because I'm getting old. And Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
So, folks, remember to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN, and leave us some comments. Let us know what you think of the show, of this discussion, or anything else. Also, stick around to the end. We've got some feedback from a listener on a recent episode. But first, let's talk about Galaxy Quest. So here's the brief recap. If it's been a long time since you've watched Galaxy Quest, if, God forbid, you haven't seen Galaxy Quest, go and see it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you haven't, pause this episode, go watch it, and then come back.
Yes. So here's the brief synopsis. The cast of an old 1980s space adventure television series, Galaxy Quest, now spend most of their days attending fan conventions and making promotional appearances. Though the series, full of himself former star, Jason Nesmith, thrives on the attention, the other cast members resent him, and to varying degrees, the states of their careers. But then they encounter some interesting fans who take them on a new adventure based on a misunderstanding and give them a new meaning in their lives, I suppose you could put it.
Yeah, that's more the premise than a synopsis of what happens. But
yeah.
So this is a roman à clef for Star Trek. A roman à clef being a type of story where you're really talking about identifiable people, but with the names changed.
Right.
And so Jason Nesmith is our stand-in for William Shatner.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody on the Galaxy Quest crew corresponds exactly to someone on Star Trek, but they're clearly analogs.
Yeah.
Right.
Other than Jason Nesmith being Captain Kirk, Commander Taggart, as they call him here, the other most clear reference is, or stand-in, is Alan Rickman playing Dr. Lazarus, who has a weird head and is basically kind of playing a combination of Spock and Worf.
I see. Yeah, I agree. Yep.
You also have Sigourney Weaver as a sort of stand-in for Uhura, except her job's a little different. Instead of running communications, I mean, she does run communications, but her job is to repeat whatever the computer says. And to talk to the computer. The computer seems to respond to her verbal requests better than anybody else's verbal requests.
Yes.
And you then have a guy named Laredo, or that's his character's name, who plays sort of a combination of Geordie LaForge, Sulu, and Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, I agree. And then you have Tony Shalhoub playing Fred Kwan.
Tech Sergeant Chen.
Who is kind of a really laid-back Scotty.
Yeah. Tony Shalhoub's part in this is awesome. And and one of the things I noticed, so we've got, those are our 5 main cast members from the original Galaxy Quest, which aired in around like 1980 to 1982. And that's the right number. One of the problems they have with Star Trek is having too many principals. that they're trying to focus on. And this became a real problem in the movies, because if you're an actor, why do I want to show up to say hailing frequencies open, Captain? I want something meatier to do than that. And they really struggled in the original series movies to find things for the characters to do that weren't Kirk or Spock, or to some degree McCoy.
Right.
And by the last one, they couldn't even get everybody back because they just did not have enough for them to do. But that is not a problem in Galaxy Quest. In Galaxy Quest, every one of the main characters does stuff that clearly moves the plot forward. They all have their individual moments of crisis where they are dealing with something. And it's like, this is the right number of people. We even have an additional guy who's crewman number 6, who is
literally
literally crewman number 6. The actor's name is supposed to be Guy Fleegman, but his and so they just call him Guy. But he doesn't even have a character name, and he perceives himself as the red shirt, as the guy who dies to prove the situation is serious. And so once he realizes what's going on, he's terrified for his life.
Yeah. Well, and the funny part is, like, he's literally the crewman who dies before the first commercial break.
Yes.
He's the guy who's
he was an extra.
Instantly dies.
Yeah. Well, and his name is Guy. I mean, that's the best part of it, is that they literally named the character Guy, which is played by Sam Rockwell. A couple other characters is the head of the Thermians, the aliens who are here on a misunderstanding to recruit the crew of the Galaxy Quest. His name his name is Maltazar, played by Enrico Colantoni, who is awesome. I love him in so many things. Such a great cast.
So the premise, and that aspect of the premise is there's this alien race called the Thermians. They look in their natural form kind of like octopus monsters, but they use these appearance generators to look human, and they look like, cosplaying sci-fi fans from Planet of the Vampires, the old Italian movie that inspired Alien. And they have been watching Galaxy Quest on television from space, because the radio waves propagate. And in their culture, they have never invented fiction. So they don't understand what they're watching. They think everything they see on TV is a historical document. And they've rebuilt, they had real problems in their culture, but then Galaxy Quest inspired their culture and caused a reformation on Thermia and saved them. And now they've built a replica of the Protector, the Galaxy Quest ship, that's fully functional based on what they saw on the TV show. They've been in a conflict with something called the Ceres Empire, led by a kind of reptilian insect lobster-headed guy named Ceres, and they're trying to negotiate a peace treaty with him, but they're terrible at diplomacy. So they decide to come to Earth to get Tim Allen's character to do the negotiation for them. He thinks he's just helping some fans do a video production in their basement. And so rather than take it seriously and negotiate, he just orders them to fire all their weapons at Ceres.
Because he's hungover.
And he's hungover. and they do that. By the way, he also lives in the famous Stahl house in the Hollywood Hills. If you recognize the house that Tim Allen lives in, it's been in a bunch of stuff, including The Pilot of Columbo and a bunch of other things. So if it looks familiar, that's why. But then it turns out Ceres is not dead, and wants to negotiate a surrender. So the Thermians come back, and this time they take not just Tim Allen, who by this point has realized this is all real, but also the rest of the Galaxy Quest crew, who think this is an acting gig for some fans, and have a very rude awakening. And there's this moment where one of the ways they transport you up is using something they call a pod. And a light appears beneath your feet, and then this goop comes up over your legs and covers your entire body, and you're rocketed through space at tremendous velocity before being suddenly deposited where you're at your destination, where the goop vanishes and you're kind of smoking a little bit. And so you have all of the Galaxy Quest crew except Tim Allen, who's gotten there early. All of them experience this together. They're just stunned standing on the pod pad at the end of it. And these octopus monsters come in waving horrible-looking mechanical torture devices at them. and and screeching. And then they suddenly turn into the Thermians. It's like, oh, we forgot our appearance generators. We're terribly sorry. And
Yes.
and Tim Allen comes in and it's like, hey, guys, you want the full tour of the ship? And it's all been so much that at that moment, Guy just screams. And it's terrific.
But Tech Sergeant Quan is like, cool.
Yeah. Then Tony Shalhoub beams up and he's like, that was a heck of a thing.
Yeah. I just love his character.
He has so many eccentricities in this. I mean, he's ultra relaxed. He acts like he's stoned a lot of the time.
Well,
he apparently has the munchies because he's always eating. He's always looking for food. He's got a giant paper grocery bag of goodies that he carries around with him.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at one point, Guy even asks him, are you stoned? Because his attitude is so weird. But even beyond that, like when he fits into the role of being the chief engineer on the Protector, he's got this team of Thermians that are the ones who really know the science, and they're solving problems, and he's like, okay, everybody, group hug.
Yes. Gotten this one right.
You know,
I like the ships ships blowing up or their power sources blowing up. Hey guys, they tell me there's a problem.
Ships coming apart and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So apparently Tony Shalhoub did not have a lot of lines. So his direction was just kind of like do stuff. And so a lot of what he does for this movie is nonverbal stuff that he just does in the scene, in the background or whatever.
But that's his comedy, though. I mean, he very much is. Everything you see him in, there's so much more physical action than there is words.
Right. So I want to talk about this. Some of the rest of the cast, people that you know who were unknown at the time. Rainn Wilson has like the briefest line in this. He was supposed to have a bigger role, then got a part and had to leave. But Rainn Wilson, who ends up in The Office as a big character,
and Discovery, Star Trek Discovery,
and Star Trek Discovery, right? That's right. He goes back, and then we have Justin Long as the nerdy fan Brandon, who he and his pals are the true heroes of this film because they're the ones who save the day. Yeah, in a sense. And that's kind of goes to the heart of the movie. In 1999, when this came out, this was before the whole geek renaissance, shall we say? When geek went mainstream, San Diego Comic-Con became the biggest entertainment event of the year, all that sort of stuff.
I remember it. I could go to San Diego Comic-Con in the 90s, and it was huge then, but it was at least tolerable.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Now it's all, lots, too many people. And so, but this was when geekdom didn't have the respect it has now in some ways. It didn't have the impact. And so this movie, it feels like an homage to the fans who keep things like Star Trek alive through their love of it and their desire to talk about it and to know everything about it.
And I think that's the reason why it has become so popular is, first of all, there is a documentary, Never Surrender, which just came out last year or 2 years ago, which is very much worth watching. And, one thing he talks about is it really was not a big success. It made money at the box office, but it wasn't like this huge mega success in the box office by any stretch of the imagination. And part of that was, of course, the suits not promoting it well. But it became much more popular because at first it was looked upon almost as an insult towards Star Trek fans at first.
Which it is not. It's clearly...
It is not at all.
Coming from
not
a place of love. It's like Lower Decks.
Yeah. And that's what people realized very quickly. It's like, no, the people who wrote this, who did this, they like Star Trek. They like the Star Trek universe. They like the Star Trek mythos. And it also touches something I think a lot of geeks, and I know speaking for myself, we want it to be real. We know that when you watch the original series, it's any Star Trek, it's all plywood sets and paint and lights and actors and fake. we want it to be real. We want there to be a USS Enterprise out there somewhere that we can beam up to and go to strange new worlds. And we want there to be a TARDIS that we could jump into and go through time and space with the Doctor. We want that to be real.
Yes.
And this kind of really touches on that.
That's one of the reasons why it's so successful is it plays with that real emotional connection that we make with the things we love in culture. Speaking of homage, one of the things that apparently was they were worried about was that Paramount, which owns Star Trek, or owned it at the time, it's gotten complicated, but they were worried about Paramount suing them over the design of the ship and that sort of thing. So the number of the ship, instead of NCC 1701, like Enterprise, it's NTE 3120. NTE stands for, according to the documentary that we watched, stands for not the Enterprise. So if a lawyer ever comes up and says, look, it says right on it, not the Enterprise. So
yeah. And there's a lot of it. They talk about where they had to change things because it was too close to Star Trek. And of course, at the time, Paramount had all the movie rights to Star Trek. So this was, a movie, and that caused a lot of issues there. So
yeah.
Right.
I remember when this came out after watching it. Now, it came out in 1999, which was late in the Voyager run. So Deep Space Nine was off the air. Voyager was the only thing on the air. Enterprise wasn't around yet. And the franchise felt really tired.
Right.
And it was just not in its best place. And I remember thinking Galaxy Quest deserves its own franchise more than Star Trek does at this point. That Star Trek is just tired. And this film was so much fun. It is just an emotional roller coaster with wonder and joy and comedy and fear and terror and you just cycle through all these emotions. It at least for a Star Trek fan, this is a basically perfect movie. I mean, you could tweak it here or there a little bit, but basically this is a perfect movie. And I apparently there have been attempts to get it a series or a sequel. I even had a sequel idea for it at one point that involved time travel and the Omega-13 with Saris resetting himself unbeknownst to the crew. But apparently there's still hopes of getting that to happen, although Alan Rickman's death has complicated things. But we may yet get a sequel, and apparently they're concerned with, how do you capture lightning in a bottle twice? Because we don't want to just make a sequel just to make a sequel. We want it to be good. And so I hope they are able to do that.
Yeah, well, one thing, when they first promoted this, Harold Ramis was to be the original director of this, and of course, famous for Ghostbusters, famous for his comedy and everything, but he wanted it more, not really slapstick, but he wanted it much more,
more like Spaceballs.
Gag a minute, like a Spaceballs, like a spoof.
And that is not what this should be.
No, and I think that's what's so great about it is it does start out as the comedy, and it starts out as, Tim Allen being Tim Allen and everything, but eventually it actually moves into real drama, real seriousness. There's a point where I guess Alan Rickman, Tim Allen was doing the scene with Malthazar, and of course it's, where he was being tortured. Malthazar was being tortured, and he had to reveal, I'm an actor, I'm fake. And I guess, they did the take over and over and over and over. And Tim Allen eventually says, I can't do this anymore. I don't like how I feel. Because he was getting emotional. He was actually starting to cry. And Alan Rickman turns to, I think it was Sigourney Weaver that said this. Now he's finally experiencing, I think he just experienced acting.
I love Alan Rickman. He is the best.
Just such a great, dry sense of humor. I mean, great British sense of humor.
And he was a serious actor. I mean, he had done, Die Hard and stuff like that, but he had also done, Jane Austen movies. I mean, he was a serious actor.
We watched him in a miniseries.
Yeah. Right. And, Sigourney Weaver was a big star. Tony Shalhoub had, was this pre-Monk?
This was
I think
pre-Monk.
It was before Monk.
Yeah. He was a successful actor, but he wasn't yet as big as he'd become.
Yeah, and Tim Allen was just coming off of Home Improvement, which had been running for, I think, 8 seasons.
And he was a really good choice as an actor to play the William Shatner stand-in. One of the things, now, if you're a hardcore Star Trek fan and you read about the behind-the-scenes stuff, you know that the relationships we see in Galaxy Quest between Tim Allen's character and the rest of the original crew is a fairly close analog for William Shatner's relationship to the rest of the original Enterprise crew. Shatner there are some resentments there. Now, this plays the resentments a little stronger than they seem to be in real life. There's been some reconciliation between Shatner and, like, for example, Nimoy before he died.
Mm-hmm.
But this is actually, this felt real. And Tim Allen is able to do that positive, gung-ho public persona, but with enough of an ego that you could see why people would resent him. And so he was a really good choice to do the William Shatner part.
The documentary mentions other people who were considered for that part, and I thought the list was interesting. So Kevin Kline, who actually I think he could have been good.
Yeah.
Bruce Willis would have played it a little too broad, I think.
Yeah.
He definitely had the action figure role down. I mean,
Tim Robbins, Mel Gibson would have been terrible. Alec Baldwin, Steve Martin, Bill Murray, and Robin Williams.
Oh, no, none of the last three would have done this justice.
No.
See, that would have been the Harold Ramis campy comedy.
Yes.
It would have worked fine, but that's not for what this ended up being. It turned out, it really is. I mean, it turned out so well with all the casting. And yeah, it's funny. Like, I just think of Sigourney Weaver. She really was never thought of as a comedic actress because of Alien.
Yeah, and she
that
actually
was her big breakout role,
and she has a sci-fi pedigree as an actress.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and she did comedy in Ghostbusters, but again, that was outside of her normal, what she was expected to do. So you're right,
and she wasn't a real comedic figure in Ghostbusters either.
Right,
she was a possessed figure.
Ghostbusters that were
yeah. Speaking of being a nearly perfect Star Trek movie, the documentary starts out with a quote from David Mamet, the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright. Says, there are 4 perfect films: The Godfather, A Place in the Sun, Dodsworth, I have no idea what that is, and Galaxy Quest, which I think is just a hysterical collection of movies. But it does perfectly straddle that line between farce and serious drama and comedy. It is perfect in that way. Even
in the scenes on Earth, at the beginning, there's really fascinating stuff. Oh, so Tim Allen's character Jason Nesmith is chronically late, apparently, because he's just not a punctual guy, and so he's showing up late to this convention. He's forcing everybody to wait for like 90 minutes because he's so late. And when he gets there, he doesn't care about the fact he's late. He's not apologetic. It's like, oh, I had this thing going on. But then once he's actually interacting with the fans, he gives the fans what they want in a way the other actors are not. The other actors are happy to be there and sign autographs and stuff, but they're really consumed by their resentments and towards each other and towards what's happened in their careers. They're not focused on the fans. And Jason Nesmith is. He is there once he's finally there, he is on. He is there for the fans, to help the fans have a good time and give them what they want. And they even have Sigourney Weaver's character comment on it. That's like, he really loves what he does.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a fascinating insight about a redeeming one, because, the Jason Nesmith character is meant to be, to some degree, especially in the beginning, unsympathetic.
Right.
But he has this redeeming quality. He really is. He has a customer service mindset for the fans to help them have a good time.
Yeah.
At one point that fails. He goes into the bathroom and he overhears someone mocking him and the show and the fans, and it kind of throws him off. And so when Justin Long and his buddies come up to him at the table and want to ask him some technical question about a conflict, an error in the show, in continuity, he blows up at him and tells them it's just a show,
which is famously something William Shatner has done.
Yeah,
right.
Well, he did it in that Saturday Night Live skit, which was great. Yeah,
But I think that was actually playing off a real event. I think that Saturday Night Live skit was play off something Shatner did at one point.
And it certainly plays off situation Shatner has been in, where obsessive fans were asking him trivial questions about the show that he didn't want to answer.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I can understand, I was hitting things at random.
Yeah.
I love the in the Saturday Night Live sketch where Shatner is saying it's just a TV show. And so the fans are like, so you're saying we should pay more attention to the movies?
Right.
Well, it's interesting watching those scenes where it's the actors maybe being themselves, or at least in the fans. And, admittedly, never having been to a con, never having met anyone who you would even remotely consider famous by any stretch of imagination, except, maybe Catholic famous. Some, people who are, more well-known in the Catholic circles.
Yeah, like the Pope. I'm a Catholic famous.
Oh, no. Certain people who might be on this podcast, right, Dom? No.
Sure.
But I've always wondered, like, when you go to a con and you meet these actors who, they meet people all day, how much of that is they're in their persona they want to show? When if you met, William Shatner, if you met, David Tennant from Doctor Who, you met, all these actors, how much are you actually meeting that person, or are you just meeting the persona they do, their con persona?
The character that they're playing.
The character they're playing, which is different from the character they play on the show, but it's the character they show to the people.
Well, everybody who is, speaking as someone who is asked to go to Catholic conventions as a Catholic well-known person, you do want to be on for the people there. And it can be dicey at times. You have to think really, at least if you're trying to do your job, which I try to, you have to, let's say you've been assigned to eat dinner with a group of people. There's so much more that goes into that than people realize if you're hosting a table, because you've got to interact with everybody at the table to make sure that they feel like they've had adequate personal interaction with you. You have to make sure that nobody at the table dominates the conversation so that everybody gets a chance to speak, and you have to pull the shy people out of their shells to get interaction with them so that they feel satisfied afterwards, so they don't come away thinking, oh, he just completely ignored me, and let this other person dominate the conversation. And there are people who will try to dominate the conversation, and you have to find ways to navigate around that in a way that doesn't let them do it, but also they don't feel like like they don't feel bad.
Right.
And so there is a definite different mode you go into when you're interacting with people at conventions, but it's still based on you.
Right.
And so I think if you're meeting a celebrity, you're still seeing a good bit of who that person is.
And I can understand that completely, because I know even just, as a priest, when I'm there at the church, say before or after Mass, I have to be interacting with people and I have to be talking with people, but I hope my personality still shows through, even as I may be a little more outgoing than I usually would prefer to be. I am an introvert, and, it being able to kind of pull out of myself a little bit, but still having my personality show through. I'm not putting up a front. I'm not putting up a fake version of me. And that's what I always kind of wonder about some of these actors, because of course they get paid to be an alternate person, to be someone else on TV, and so on.
I think there are some actors who they are so much an actor that they sometimes have trouble not acting in public. But I think there are a lot of others who can be personable while reserving their private self a little bit.
Right.
And I think that's a fair balance. I've been to conventions. I've met a few of the Star Trek cast. I met Marina Sirtis famously once. I think I told the story about her commenting on my Spuds McKenzie t-shirt and me being, 18 years old or 19 years old and being all agog and saying, "You're pretty," or something equally suave and debonair. And her being very gracious to the nerd in front of her. So I think there's a lot of just being a nice person. If they're a nice person in their regular life, I think a lot of times they'll be a nice person in public because, like you said, Jimmy, they're doing a job. They're being paid to be at these conventions, and they're going to be professionals.
Sometimes
and do their
they're
job.
being paid. Sometimes they're not.
Right. A lot of, I think some of the big ones, especially, they're either being paid to go and promote a project or being paid by the convention itself. So
there are also, though, I've had encounters at conventions where it's like, okay, this person is not putting their best foot forward.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Your stories about that too, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the stuff in the movie itself. Some of the fun bits. One of the things I want to talk about is the rock monster. They go to this planet to have to get a beryllium sphere, which is an analog of the dilithium crystals.
Yeah,
that power the Enterprise.
And beryllium is a real metal. It's element number 4. It's one of the lightest metals on it. It's the second lightest metal, other than lithium, on the periodic table.
Right. And Nesmith, or Commander Taggart, has to fight this big rock monster that attacks him, which becomes an analog to the Gorn fight between Kirk and the Gorn in the original series episode Arena. So it's a lot of fun. And he loses his shirt in that thing in the fight, and he beams back up to the ship, and Alan Rickman's character says, "Of course, he lost his shirt again," which is a great reference
I see
to
you
Kirk.
Managed to get your shirt off. Yeah.
yes, such a perfect line.
I found the rock monster sequence really interesting. So at first, he's been captured by these little childlike aliens with horrible shark teeth, and they're all surrounding him on these high bluffs in Utah, chanting Garignac, Garignac, Garignac. And at first, Tim Allen thinks that Garignac is this weird-looking bipedal pig lizard monster in front of him.
Yeah.
And he can kind of hold his own against this pig lizard. And then they say, okay, we're going to use the digital conveyor to bring you up. And that's clearly they've just changed the name of the transporter for copyright reasons. And so they and Teb, who was one of the Thermians there who is helping them, has this woo reaction to we're going to use the digital conveyor to bring you up. And they're like, it's perfectly safe, right? And he's going, well, it has never been successfully tested. But then it was designed for your anatomy, not ours. And now that we have the master Tech Sergeant Chin here, he can manipulate the controls like a maestro and bring him up. And so they try bringing up the pig lizard. And Tim Allen's listening over the communicator and hearing all this stuff going on up there because the pig lizard has materialized inside out.
Right.
and one of them, which is kind of like the transporter accident in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. And then one of them says, but the pig lizard is inside out. And Tim Allen hears that, and then it explodes, and Teb said, and it exploded. As he's got pig lizard guts all over his face. And then it turns out Garignac is not the pig lizard, it's the rock monster, who then proceeds to form, and it's like a swirl of telekinetic boulders, or a telekinetic swirl of boulders in kind of a humanoid outline. And part of my brain said, this makes no sense scientifically, but I don't care because this is so much fun. And that's what you want in movies like this. You want it to be so much fun, you're willing to give them the silly science.
Yeah. That's right. A guy has a great line just before this, by the way, where when they first see the little blue alien, baby-like aliens, and they're not doing anything mean yet, he totally calls it. He's like, no, they're going to turn to be scary and awful and evil, and they're going to kill me because I'm red shirt guy number 6.
And there's going to be way more of them. And Sigourney Weaver is like trying to calm him down, and he's like, did any of you ever watch the show? and then when they do turn evil, Sigourney Weaver is like, we've got to get Guy out of here before one of those things kills him.
Yeah, he has a panic attack on the shuttlecraft going down to the surface where he's like, I know I'm going to die here. Like, I don't even have a last name. They didn't even give me a last name. It's like, Guy, you have a last name. What is it? I don't know. He's like, see? It's like,
Well, I like that because he he wanted to go on that mission because he thought he was the red shirt who was going to die on the ship by something horrible, and now he realized he's the red shirt who's going to die on the planet by something horrible.
That's great.
By the way, there's a reason that they're on this side quest to get a beryllium sphere. So they encountered Saris again and totally got their butts kicked because they realized we're actors, we're not really a trained space crew, and we need to get out of here, but they can't because Saris will shoot down any pods leaving the ship. And so they tried. Saris attacked the ship and did major damage to it. They then had to run through a minefield of magnetic mines that had been left over from an old war. In the process, they took all kinds of damage, and their beryllium sphere cracked, and they don't have another on board. So they have to go on this side quest to a planet to get a new beryllium sphere. And as far as side quests go, this was so much better than Canto Bight. There was like a reason for this, and it made sense, and it hooked up into the main plot, and it was like, wait, note to Star Wars, this is how you do a side quest.
Right.
And of course, in a typical Star Trek trope, all the main crew are the ones who go on the away mission. It's the commander and the second command and all that stuff. You know, it's all the head people. It's not like the ensigns, the enlisted who go on the away mission. Oh no, it's the head people who are like important or something.
So when they get back to the ship, they eventually they find Saris has shown up and has taken over the ship, and they're all been captured. And then they have to they separate, and they're all going in different directions
because they have different jobs.
Different jobs. That's right. And the Sigourney Weaver's character and Tim Allen's character are running through the access corridors, the below decks, and they're in communication with the Justin Long's character, Brandon, who's got he and his friends have technical plans for the entire ship, which is totally a thing I did when I was a kid. Well, I could have done that.
And there's that great scene where, you know, Brandon has the real communicator, and Tim Allen's trying to talk to him. It's like, I'm not a nutcase. I'm not, you know, we know it's fake. Brandon, the ship is real. I knew it.
Yeah.
I knew it, yes. And so he's trying to lead them through the ship, and it's like, okay, now take a left turn. And then it's like the Hall of Chompers, and it's these big pistons smashing together. And they're
vertically
like,
and horizontally.
And Gwen, Sigourney Weaver's character, says you can clearly see her mouth moving, saying, bleep that. And of course they wanted to get the PG-13 rating, so she says, screw this. And it's like, who's designing this? Who wrote this stuff? Like, why is this even in a ship? And which is great because we've seen that so many times on Star Trek. But and then they get stuck, and they're waiting for, there's a countdown timer, and they've hit the button to stop the countdown because the ship's going to explode. Whatever it is. It's not really important. It's the Omega-13. And they're like,
no,
Brandon,
that was the power. Their power system was overloading. It was.
That's
they're
right.
going to have a fusion reactor explosion or whatever.
And they're calling for Brandon, and Brandon's not there. And it turns out that
mom's making him take out the garbage.
Yes. I love that. That is so perfect. Mother, you do not understand how important it is that I be doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I just thought that was awesome.
And of course, you had the countdown that it had to go to 1.
Right.
You couldn't just stop at that point. It had to go to 1.
So
countdown always goes to 1.
In this side quest, we have a whole string of cliches that Sigourney Weaver points out as we do them. At first, they're walking through corridors, but then they have to crawl through ducts. And it's like, why is it always ducts? And then they hit the chompers, which are the ridiculous threat that shouldn't exist. Then they have the countdown that they also have a spinning fan that she comments, well, there's nothing here but this spinning fan we have in every episode. And and if you look at sci-fi shows, it's like Battlestar Galactica, Stargate, Babylon 5, they've all got spinning fans in the background, big industrial spinning fans. And then the countdown that has to go to 1. And and it's a, you know, it's something someone who's really seen a lot of sci-fi and knows the tropes put that sequence together.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So the movie is full of great lines. There's so many great lines. Alan Rickman's character Dr. Lazarus has this line from the show that everyone always wants him to do, and he's
the
equivalent
equivalent
sick and tired.
of Live Long and Prosper.
Yeah.
Right. And it's by grab Thor's hammer, you will be avenged. And he's in the beginning of the movie, he's like, I'm not going to say that line one more time. I'm never going to say it again. And he's like, every time he's forced to say it. But there comes a point where this one of the Thermians who really looks up to him and has said he's modeling his life on the culture of Dr. Lazarus's people. I forget what the name of the culture is. And he gets killed. He's shot and he's dying. And this is the point where Alan Rickman, as such a great actor, he says the line with such meaning and feeling, and you just feel it. And right in that moment, he means it.
Yeah.
By grab Thor's hammer, you will be avenged. And I'm like, what an awesome moment.
It's really well set up because the relationship, the character's name is Quelek.
Yes.
And Quelek is an analog for fans who really modeled themselves after Mr. Spock and Vulcan culture.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this is Alan Rickman meeting Quelek is like Leonard Nimoy meeting one of these fans. And then Quelek is into all of the alien culture stuff from Dr. Lazarus's people. And Alan Rickman's kind of going along with it, kind of resentfully. But then they start having success. And then they save all these people. And then out of nowhere, Quelek is shot. And he's like, I'm shot. And he falls down and he confesses to Alan Rickman that I've always thought of you as a father. And it's at that moment that Rickman delivers the full version of the line, meaning it, by grab Thor's hammer, by the sons of Warvan, you shall be avenged. And it is a really moving moment. And it's also really cool how they've used blue food coloring to suggest blood in Quelek's mouth.
Yes. The poor guy's like, blah, blah.
Very fitting.
So, some other great lines I got to mention, by the way. The Thermians, they say, you are our last hope.
Yeah.
Like they have this monotone way of speaking. There's, of course, never give up, never surrender, which is the captain's line. Gwen DeMarco, Sigourney Weaver, they're in a meeting, and she's doing the thing where she repeats everything that the computer says, and someone calls her on it, and she says, look, I have one job on this lousy ship. It's stupid, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's such a great scene because, Tim Allen, the commander's, asks something of the computer and the computer doesn't respond. He looks at her and she does it and the computer immediately responds.
But that's such a quotable line you could do in the workplace all the time. Look, I have one job on this lousy ship. It's stupid, but I'm going to do it.
And that's an illustration of how the cast ends up embracing their roles. Even by the end, Guy is ready to rush in and to a situation where he believes he'll be killed in order to save people. It's like, I'm going to die. It's either going to be as a hero or a coward. I'd rather die as a hero. And at that moment, Tony Shalhoub says, maybe you're the plucky comic relief. Did you ever think of that? And actually, that's what he is. In this movie, he's not the guy who dies. He is the comic relief who's afraid of dying.
Right, right. So awesome.
And then we have that great scene where Tony Shalhoub, he gets the idea, Tech Sergeant 10 gets the idea of how to take care of the bad guys by beaming up the rock monster.
Yes, and the rock monster.
He just gets a devilish grin on his face. Oh, this is going to be good.
There's another line where Tim Allen's character says about Rickman, give him a hand. He's British. That's
an MC as they're introducing the crew to the convention audience.
Right.
Give him a hand. He's British.
That's right. And then of course there's a little side story about how a little side plot about how Tech Sergeant Kwan
Chen
falls in love with one of the Thermians.
Her name is Laliari.
Yes, Lally. And they end up kissing and kind of falling off screen. And Guy's character sees him. And this was a line that was made up on the spot by Sam Rockwell. He's like, oh, hey, whoa, oh, that's not right. Yeah. It's like,
she's reverting partly to her octopus form.
Yes. Oh, that's not right. Which is another great quotable line. So many great lines in this movie.
One of them that's very interesting because there's this rivalry between Alan Rickman's Dr. Lazarus and Tim Allen's Commander Taggart. And so part of at this point in the show, at this point in the movie, Saris has left the ship. He set their reactor to detonate in like 8 minutes, and it's way more than 8 minutes. And he's venting air from C deck to asphyxiate a whole bunch of Thermians that are in their quarters on C deck, and they can't get out. And he's left a bunch of his own men to blow up with the ship. Apparently, they are unaware of this, that the ship's going to blow up, even though the computer is constantly announcing that it's about to blow up and the command override is offline. But so this actually is one point that I think they could have executed a little better, because there's a logic problem. Why are these guys not realizing they're all about to die?
Right.
But when Quellick and Alan Rickman are able to save the asphyxiating Thermians, immediately the credit goes to Commander Taggart has saved us. and at an earlier point in the movie, Alan Rickman's resentment was so intense, he would have thrown a fit at this point. But now that they've been through all this, it's like, let's just get to the command deck.
He's just mildly annoyed at this point.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention is there have been other homage to Star Trek. Most recently, the Orville, which the three of us have talked about in the past.
This is better than the Orville.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was going to say, how much is the Orville an attempt to retread the ground of Galaxy Quest?
I think what the Orville was an attempt to retread the ground of Next Gen. And because they couldn't get a Next Gen show like on the air, they decided to make it as a parody, giving them legal cover. But they only wanted enough parody to provide legal cover. What they really wanted to do was tell next-gen style stories.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think it's not as successful as this because it doesn't take its role as a parody seriously enough.
Well,
right.
I know Fox promoted it as a comedy, but it's pretty clear when you watch, especially the second season of the Orville, it's really not. There is some comedic elements, but it's not meant to be a comedy. And Seth MacFarlane was very clear. He wanted to direct an actual Star Trek series. He actually approached CBS and Paramount about doing an actual Star Trek series, and they kind of went, "Go away, kid. Go do your Family Guy thing. Just leave us alone." And so he came up with the Orville as kind of a. And yeah, the Orville really is. It's meant to be another ship in the TNG universe. The Enterprise E is off flying off somewhere, and you got the Orville doing its thing.
Right. That's what it was supposed to feel like. Yeah. In fact, apparently the Orville is not done. Apparently it's still coming back.
There's supposed to be a third season. It was affected by this lovely virus that has affected everything else.
Yeah.
But there's a third season that's not going to be on Fox. It's going to be on Hulu, I think.
Yeah, I think I heard that. Yeah. So one other thing to mention is setting this movie again in time in 1999, sci-fi movies at the end of the 90s were grim and dystopian, basically. They were not fun movies. And I think it feels like the studio, what was it, DreamWorks was the studio behind it.
Yep.
They thought, well, this is obviously not a regular sci-fi movie. It's a movie for kids, so we really should market it at kids. And in the documentary, they talk about how that was a mistake, that there was they thought it was being pushed toward kids instead of to the adult fans of TOS and TNG.
I had to laugh. There was a point where they talk about how it's a Tim Allen movie. Of course, Tim Allen had just done Santa Claus at this point, and he had been on Home Improvement, which was wildly popular.
In Toy Story.
Family show and Toy Story. And I kind of laugh at that because have you ever seen any of Tim Allen's stand-up?
It's not family friendly.
Crude. He was not family friendly by any stretch. And he had a rough, he self-inflicted. He was a drunk. He did drugs. He got busted for really bad, driving around 100 miles an hour down streets of Los Angeles, stuff like that. He had, especially when he was doing stand-up, was not a good person. And he was not a family-friendly person by any stretch of the imagination. He's since changed quite a bit.
Yeah. Speaking of Tim Allen, though, one of the reasons he wanted to do this is apparently he's a huge sci-fi nerd. He talks about that, not just Star Trek, but with other stuff too. So that was an aspect of him doing this. The director Dean Parisot was an unknown when he took on this. He had done precisely one previous movie. He took over for Harold Ramis. I mean, knocking it out of the park, home run on your second time out, which is pretty good. And then just one other thing, other note I mentioned. I'll turn it over to you guys for any of your notes. But the movie is shot in 3 different aspect ratios, which I didn't notice until they talked about it in the documentary. It starts out square for TV, like the old TV show. Then it goes wide when they go from the old TV show to the quote-unquote real world of the convention. So it's get this wider aspect. And then when Jason, the first time he realizes he's in space, when he's standing on the transport pad about to be covered in goo and shot into the space, it opens up into the anamorphic, really wide. And I thought that was so clever because it subconsciously triggers you to think differently about this movie in different places. So I thought that was a fascinating aspect of it.
You can see the first change, on when you watch it on Amazon streaming or whatever, because of course it goes from, you got the letterbox and then it widens out. You don't really see the second one because of course it not going any wider. I think it shrinks actually. It shrinks the
top to
TV
bottom
screen, top to bottom a little bit. So you don't really notice it. But I can imagine at a theater that would have been really impressive where the doors open up and it just keeps getting wider and wider and wider than it was before.
Right.
That would have been a really interesting effect.
Yeah. So do you guys have any other notes on the movie that you want to add, Father Cory?
Talking about casting, we mentioned Rainn Wilson, who had been both in this. This was like this first real serious, I think he'd been like in a soap opera or something like that before this. So like this was his first real serious role. And then of course he was recently in Discovery. Well, there's 4 other people who were credited roles in both Galaxy Quest and Star Trek. Because there's lots of people who are like stunt doubles and crew and behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff. But one of them, Matt Winston, is a technician. He's like really early on in Galaxy Quest. Crewman Daniels in Enterprise.
Right. Daniels,
he was
that's
in
right.
That. And then there's Heidi Swedberg is the mother, Brandon's mother in this.
Yep.
She was Relican in DS9's Profit and Loss episode, where she was one of the Cardassian dissident students.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Robin Sachs, who played Saris, was General Valen in Voyager's The Void. He was the head of the opposing force to Voyager's quote-unquote Federation in that episode.
Okay.
And then the second in command in this, Wayne Pear, was Gil in Voyager's Random Thoughts. He was the one who traded in the dark thoughts of the crew. He was the one who, there was a race of people who traded stories via telepathy, and he traded in the dark stories. So there's 5 people who had been both in Galaxy Quest and a Star Trek series.
That's
not
awesome.
Again, not counting all the people who were uncredited and behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, cool. Jimmy, any final thoughts?
So the Thermians are from the Klaatu Nebula, and that's a reference to Klaatu Barada Nikto, or the robot Klaatu, at least, from The Day the Earth Stood Still. I really like the Thermian body language because the actors playing the Thermians don't use their bodies the way humans do, since they're supposed to be octopus monsters that just are in human form due to an appearance generator. And so one of the things you'll see them doing is they use their legs differently when they're walking. They're kind of a little more dramatic and stiffer, but then they also hold their arms in front of them. And as they're walking or running, they'll kind of paddle their arms in front of them a little bit as if they were tentacles hanging off their front that they're balancing with. Also, when they're in the Stahl house where Tim Allen lives at the beginning of the movie, and he's like looking for a shoe, he says, "Look for my other shoe. It looks like this one." And he holds it up, and they all immediately start looking at the ceiling as if they might find a shoe there. There's a great moment where they're about to pilot the Protector out of the space dock, and Laredo has to do it because they've patterned all of it after his hand motions, and he hasn't done this in years and years and years, and he like scrapes the side of the ship against the space dock. And everybody's just watching this happening and and you can see them leaning as if they're willing him away from that wall of the space dock. when they're trying to explain at one point that they're actors and that not everything you see on TV is real, Sigourney Weaver is saying, well, like, surely, you know, you've seen Gilligan's Island, and immediately the Thermians are all, those poor people.
Yes, that's right.
A little detail that I really liked about Saris's costume is, so he's this lizard, insect, lobster-looking guy. He's all green. But he's got these tines on his back. And when he gets upset, they will, like, suddenly fan out. And they never comment on this, but we see it happen a few times. And it's like, okay, that's a believable move that, you know, some animals have, like, they will puff themselves up to appear more threatening. And if you've got an upset, whatever he is, having these little lobster wings fly out is a nice touch.
Yes.
We have a bunch of stuff happening with airlocks, and this is another one where it's not really that realistic because, so here's a tip. If you're ever in an airlock and someone's about to space you, don't stand towards space. Stand towards the inside. Get as close as you can to the interior door of the airlock. The reason is there will not be enough air in front of you to push you out the airlock. The more air is in front of you, the more it's going to push you when you're open to space. So you could actually stand right up against the glass on the interior surface, and you're not going to move. And that'll give you your best chance for survival. So we see some of Saris's guys who are kind of in the middle of an airlock getting spaced. And then we see the Thermians having the air vented from their compartments, and it goes on for minutes, and there's all this wind and stuff happening. It's like, no, you don't get wind unless you have an ongoing air source. So the air would just vent and be done with it if that were the case. You wouldn't have all this violent wind. You'd have a rush of violent wind and then nothing. But it's still fun and dramatic to look at.
Yes.
And then, of course, the movie ends with the cast getting their show back for the new adventures of the Galaxy Quest. And we get basically the opening credits for the new show where we see all of the actors and the parts they're playing. And so we've got, you know, Jason Nesmith as Commander Taggart. We've got Dr. Lazarus. We've got Lieutenant Madison. We've got Laredo. We have Tech Sergeant Chin and Jane Doe as Laliari.
Yeah.
And then Guy Fleegman as Security Chief Rock Ingersoll. So finally he has a name.
He's got a name. That is, yes. So, I mean, sort of as a wrap up, Galaxy Quest, it feels like a Trek movie because it has all the hallmarks of Star Trek. It feels true, but it doesn't take itself seriously, and yet offends no one. Even in taking itself not seriously, it doesn't offend. It doesn't offend the fans or the people who make the thing. It respects everyone who loves it.
There may be exceptions here or there.
Sure. But in general, I think that's what makes it a great movie and a great Star Trek movie. So I think that should do it for our discussion of Galaxy Quest. As I promised, though, we have some feedback, and we had an email from Timothy Meeting on our recent episode on The Conscience of the King, the original series episode. He asked, did you consider the possibility of Kirk as Hamlet? You have Claudius and Ophelia, and have acknowledged them as such. Given that, couldn't Kirk's erratic and irrational behavior be a deliberate conceit on the part of the writers to portray him as a modern Hamlet? And if so, couldn't Spock and McCoy have some of the characteristics of Horatio and Polonius, thus rounding out the play within the play within the play? And then Timothy says, thanks for the podcast. It's thought-provoking and entertaining. And I always enjoy the banter among the three of you. Thank you, Timothy.
I think it's an interesting idea. I hadn't considered that, but Kirk is kind of irrationally torn in the middle, like Hamlet is in much of his play. And, of course, Kirk does have counselors that advise him.
Yeah,
Fortunately, there's no Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in this that Kirk sends off to their deaths knowingly.
Right. That's fortunate. Thanks, Timothy. That's was great feedback. So we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Max S., Mark R., Bo H., Rochelle K., and Jason H. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. Now is a great time to become a StarQuest patron. Thanks to a generous gift from a StarQuest supporter when you start a new Patreon monthly pledge at sqpn.com/give. The first 3 months will be matched by an equal amount from our donor to support all our shows, including this one, which makes your gift go even further. And we're getting very close to reaching our goal of $2,000 in new monthly pledges. So won't you help us reach that goal and close the gap? If you've been thinking of becoming a StarQuest patron, now's the time. Visit sqpn.com/give today. So that's it from us. What did you think of Galaxy Quest? Have you seen it? Is it the greatest Star Trek movie made? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Next Generation episode, Justice. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Be afraid. Be very afraid. And by Grabthar's hammer, by the sons of Warvan, you shall be avenged.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, never give up, never surrender.